Hello, everyone, and welcome to Growing Together, a gardening podcast with me, John Lamb, and Don Kinsler, a lifelong gardener and the North Dakota State University Extension horticulturist for Cass County. Don, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, and spring can't be far away because Valentine's Day is right around the corner. It's going to be fun today to talk about some Valentine flowers and ways that we can make that extra special. And so, yeah, I'm happy to see Valentine's Day coming. I think we've turned the corner on winter.
Well, that's optimistic, but we've at least turned the corner on January.
Yes.
And so we've got 1 month out of the way. February is a short month. It's totally unpredictable. And March can be kind of a messy slog, but we're getting there. We're getting there. The days are getting longer and warmer. And that's really nice to see.
It is. Hey, did your trees explode in the cold weather?
Nothing. Did you not?
Did you see all the chatter on social media about the exploding trees?
Well, I saw that there was some, yeah, and I wondered if our topic last week, if we would hear. Did you hear from anybody?
I did not. I did not hear anybody from that. And of course, exploding trees. Boy, what a good marketing concept for a term. But of course, it was frost cracks.
Perhaps a bit of a misnomer.
That have been around forever. And so, no, my trees did not explode.
Well, that's good.
They're intact.
That's good.
That's good news.
That's the best to know, is that the trees will be there, and they will be there once it gets warmer, and it'll leaf out again. Well, yeah. So today we're going to talk about Valentine's Day flowers and maybe how to put together a bouquet. But before that, you've got a letter from a listener.
I do. Penny writes in, I enjoy your podcast. I'm looking forward to a new gardening season. My sister asked me if I have ever heard of purple tree collards and if they grow in our area. And I said, I know just who to ask. So I'm asking, do they grow here? Are they perennial? How do you start them? Thank you. So, count the day lost, you don't learn something new. I totally have never heard of purple tree collards. Have you ever grown purple tree collards, John?
Well, I've heard of collards, but I've never heard purple tree collards, and I never really even thought about growing collards up here.
The Beverly Hillbillies show. Okay, Granny was always cooking up collard greens.
Yep.
So I had heard of collard greens. I guess I've never eaten them. So I did some searching on purple tree collards, and here's what I found out. Of course, collards are they're in the cabbage, kohlrabi, that family, cabbage, kohlrabi, Brussels sprout, broccoli, cauliflower. You got it, John. And so they're all in that same family. And so they're kale is another one. So they're all kind of somewhat related. But the intriguing thing about the purple tree collards is it's a perennial.
Oh.
But it's only perennial in winter hardy to zones 8 and 9.
Oh, it's
a southern perennial, southern United States perennial. It's not going to survive winter here. But now, when I did a little checking on purple tree collards, the reason it's called a tree collard is it can grow up to 8 feet.
Wow!
And so, great big huge thing, and likes cool weather. So, the winters down south where it's kind of cool, they can harvest this thing all year round and stake it up, and they've got a perennial source of some good greens. And of course, the purple tree collard has good purple leaves. I saw some nice photos of it. Now, the interesting thing too, Penny also asks, where do you get it? So I did a little checking on the source, and it's being sold by cuttings from some mail order place, Territorial Seeds. I've ordered from them before, seeds, but they're offering little plantlets. Okay. So it must be like a certain variety that doesn't propagate well from seed.
Okay.
So customarily, you need to get cuttings, rooted plants of purple tree collard. So it's not going to survive our winter, too many zones south, but fascinating.
I've never even thought of if collards as a general, if they are annuals or perennials. Do you know?
And so I think the standard type of collard is an annual.
So it could be grown up. Regular collard.
Yeah, regular collards. Yeah. I don't have a I don't have a yen to grow collards, but maybe I should try it. I maybe don't know what I'm missing, so maybe I need to grow collards.
Maybe it's something that you try it first from somebody who knows what they're doing, because I've had them a couple of times in the South, and
so you have eaten collards.
Yeah, they varied depending on how they were cooked from place to place. So if you find a place and you find out how they're cooked, then maybe, because there's a lot of good things we could still grow up here that we know how to cook. Yeah,
absolutely. So even though it won't, a purple tree collard won't perennialize here, well, that's okay. We got plenty of other good things to eat too. So thanks, Penny, for writing in. And anyone who does want to write in with questions, comments, successes, send photos, Donald.Kinsler, KINZLER, at ndsu.edu. And thank you for all of you who do write in.
Well, speaking of questions, one question that a lot of people will have on their mind is what to do for Valentine's Day. Do people ever write you and ask you about how to approach? Because you used to run a greenhouse. You and your wife Mary used to run a greenhouse, a garden center rather, and so you maybe know a little bit about this. But do people ask you what your thoughts are on and how you go about Valentine's Day?
I get emails on many things, but that is one thing that I don't get emails on. Is really a Valentine's Day, because I think those that sell the garden centers, flower shops, florists that sell flowers, they educate people too. So I've got to admit, I don't get many questions about Valentine's.
Do you
flowers.
think it's also kind of locked in that the expectation is you will be giving a dozen red roses and stop?
Yes, definitely. Yeah, or a slight variation of that. Yeah, exactly. But, the approach that I wanted to take today is that for many people, especially some of us, if we do things a little bit last minute, you go to, maybe it's a grocery store, maybe it's a florist that has a case of cash and carry flowers, and you pick out a nice bouquet, you go home, you give it to your sweetheart. But the approach that I'd like to take is, when you go buy that cash and carry bunch of flowers, if you do a few things to kind of make it into a floral arrangement, I mean, that sounds kind of scary, but there's some simple things you can do instead of just handing someone this bunch of flowers and say, here, have a nice day. Instead, if you kind of arrange them following the simple principles we're going to talk about, I guarantee you they are going to enjoy it. They are going to love it. I know they enjoy the bunch of flowers too. But if you've taken the extra step to kind of do this, even if it doesn't look as perfect as a professional florist, your effort is going to mean a lot to that person.
I think that you hit on a key word there, which is effort. Yes. And I think that you're showing sometimes the journey is the destination.
Yes.
Sometimes the work is the payoff itself, and it's just doing something like that. It's a very nice thing. I'm sure it's always appreciated more so. Just that showing the effort, doing that really does mean a lot to a lot of people.
It does. And so we're going to give those tips for that, for doing that. And again, it's not a whole course on floral arrangement,
right.
But a couple of simple things. Now, it's interesting too. My wife, Mary, was a trained florist. That's how we met. So when I take a bunch of flowers to her, I do my best following these steps we're going to do, and she gets a kick out of it. She could do much better than I could. But it's interesting, in horticulture, when I went to NDSU for horticulture, we were trained in almost all phases, and so we actually did have a class on floral design. So it was fun to kind of have the basics. But now, when you go to pick out flowers, and you're looking at all the different flower types, the colors, there are some messages that flowers and flower colors send. So we need to be careful to pick out the flowers and colors that are going to send the right message.
So when you talk about sending a message with flowers, my girlfriend Sam hates lilies. Is that are we talking about the scent there when you're talking about sending a message? Is it the scent that's coming across?
Well, lilies have traditionally been used on people's coffins
Oh, I did not know that. Okay.
And, of
Easter
course, Easter lilies. And so
lilies,
sometimes they've kind of been related to death and resurrection. But, you can picture some nice white lilies on someone's coffin. So maybe that's not the best thing to give to one's sweetheart. And so traditionally, there are flowers that give messages. And in fact, in the Victorian times, you could, when things were maybe a little more subtle, you didn't just come out and blurt things out. So you could send messages to someone with certain flowers and certain colors, and then they'd get the message. Okay, so now we want to make sure that you're sending the right message. So, let's talk about the flower colors. Okay, for Valentine's, red. And the reason red is traditional for Valentine's Day because it represents romantic love and passionate affection. So you're not going to go wrong with giving your sweetheart red flowers. Okay, pink. Oh, that's okay too for Valentine's Day. It can represent romantic love, gratitude, appreciation, kind of a gentleness and admiration too. So pink will work. Yellow. Now that's a no-no. Yellow or orange, don't do that unless you just want to represent friendship.
Okay.
So if you want to give a friend something for Valentine's Day, yellow or orange will convey friendship, platonic passion, appreciation, congratulations. And
probably any other day but Valentine's Day, that would be okay.
Exactly.
Maybe just
exactly.
Not for Valentine's
So in other words, I'm not going to give Mary some yellow carnations.
Okay.
Yeah, so that would maybe send the wrong message. White represents honor, new beginnings. Maybe so for someone that is, newly romantic or something. White would, some white roses, maybe with a couple of red mixed in, that'd do well. Hope, innocence, purity. Blue and purple, of course, royalty for blues and purples, but also mystery and creativity. So that'd be kind of fun too to give someone some kind of purple. There are purple type roses. So the colors are one thing, and then also the type of flower can also send a message. Okay. Roses, of course, roses and Valentine's Day, perfect. So the rose, red rose, of course, very dark crimson roses. Maybe be a little leery of those. Mourning, sympathy, weeping for someone.
That's what they can symbolize.
That's what they can symbolize. But again, the person that gets deep red roses might not know that. Right. So you might get by with it. White roses, that's going to be fine. Pink roses. Now, yellow roses, again, that's friendship. So you might, think as to whether that's appropriate or not. Sunflowers in cash and carry flower bouquets. Sunflowers are very popular now.
Sunflowers are yellow, though. So that's
that's what I'm getting at. Okay. Yeah. So sunflower symbolizes happiness, adoration, loyalty, but again, maybe more towards the friendship type thing. So yellow sunflowers, maybe not give to someone that you're romantically passionate about. Daisies, innocent purity, a loyal love, daisies would probably be decent. Carnations, red and white carnations, they're wonderful. Fascination, love. It's interesting. I had to throw in a couple that were kind of interesting to me when I was looking through this. Cleome. Now, I raise cleome in the summertime as a bedding plant outdoors. I've never seen cleome given as a cut flower. I don't see those available. But cleome has a long-standing meaning. If you give someone cut flower cleome, it means elope with me. And so,
that's quite direct.
Yeah. So apparently, maybe in Victorian times, if they didn't want to come right out and say it, you'd give someone cleome, and hopefully they knew what it meant. And hydrangea. Now, this was an interesting one. Hydrangeas. You do see potted floral hydrangeas, but here was an old meaning of that, and I think by now, the meaning's probably been lost. But hydrangea means thank you for understanding. But I got a kick out of that. Thank you for understanding. So that leaves one to think a little bit.
Okay, yeah.
So anyway, I'm guessing, Mary loves hydrangeas. I've given those to her. but I had no reason to thank her for understanding. But I just thought that was kind of interesting. So when you're looking for the Valentine's flowers, do keep in mind then some of these meanings, just in case the person you give them to has heard of this before. So again, red, can't go wrong with that, reds and whites, but make sure you use yellows when you're understanding the meaning of what the yellows can be, more towards friendship.
All right, let's take a quick little break and we'll talk more about what to do once you get those flowers.
Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
All right, we're back this week and we're talking about Valentine's Day flowers, what flowers. We talked a little bit about maybe what flowers to look for, some of the symbolism in the flowers and in the colors. And now let's talk about what, if you get the flowers, how should you present them? What's a good way to, you've made the effort, you went out and you got the flowers. You don't just want to leave them on the counter. You don't want to make somebody else do. If you're buying flowers as a gift, you don't want to say, "Here, I got these for you. Now you do something with them." Yeah, you do
something with them. Yeah. So I'm going to entitle this, since I'm a guy, I'm going to entitle this "A Guy's Simple Guide to Making a Flower Arrangement."
I like this.
So that the one you give them to is just going to melt with your effort. Okay. So what do we need? Okay, we need flowers. And so when you go to a flower shop, some things are already arranged. Okay, they're in a beautiful arrangement. Okay, those you can just take and give. Okay, but what we're focusing on here, so many of us just go to the flower case. We get that bunch that's in cellophane, clear cellophane. They're all packaged up. Usually, there's kind of an assortment of flowers in there. Mm-hmm. Even if it's all roses, usually there's some greenery stuck in there, and there's maybe a packet of flower preservative in that. So that's what I'm addressing, is that kind of bunch done up in the clear plastic that you go up to the case. They're usually in water. You pick out whatever one you want and take it home. Okay, so we need the flowers. And then we need a container. So when you get home, well, maybe you've got a vase on the shelf somewhere in your house. That'll work. But a quart mason jar, a canning jar would work. Almost anything that would hold water can be used. So sometimes you might use a little creativity. But again, anything that'll hold water, you can, if you have an ice cream bucket, you could kind of use that. But yeah, but a vase would be nice. Okay, and then you just need a kitchen or a shears or pruning shears, something to cut the stems with. And then hopefully most of these come with that packet of preservative. So set that aside. You're going to put that in the final water in the container. Okay. So first thing you do, you get home with your bunch of flowers in that clear plastic. So open it up. And they usually have a rubber band around them, kind of holding them together. So cut that open. We're going to separate the flowers out, and then run some water in the sink or a bucket of water. We need to cut the stems. We need to recut the stems so that they'll soak up water better. That will keep the flowers longer. So take your shears, your pruning shears, your heavy scissors. Once you've filled up the sink with water, make that cut underwater. So submerge the bottom end of the flower stem in water, and then take your scissors or shears underwater and cut that stem. The reason for cutting it underwater, and that's what the florists do, it prevents an air bubble from getting into that stem.
Oh, okay.
So that's one trick that florists use on their arrangements so that they'll last longer for you.
Okay.
So cut the stem underwater. We might need, when we get into this, we might need to make one more cut on those flowers because sometimes they're just too long, but we don't know quite yet where to cut them. Okay, so we've started that. Also, if you've got your container now, you can kind of see how tall the stems are going to have to be. If it's a shorter type container, some of these flowers are going to be just too tall, too long. So
do you just kind of like put the flowers next to it, like on the edge of the counter? Maybe put the vase there, then lower the flowers next to it until you get about the right height. Or
I would have the flowers, once you cut them, leave the lower stems in the sink in water, and then on the counter right beside the sink, have your vase, and do this operation on the counter right beside the sink. Okay. So you've got the flowers, the stems are still submerged in water after you made that cut, and get your container right on the counter right beside the sink, and take a look at any leaves or foliage that might be going to be below the water level, and remove those. Just by hand, kind of peel those leaves off. Because if those are underwater in your vase or container, they're going to start molding, and that will shorten the life of the flowers. So any foliage, any greenery that's going to be below water, make sure you get rid of that. All right. Now, so most of the bunches of flowers that you take home have some greenery stuck in. When you buy a florist arrangement, usually they've got some greenery, some leaves, other things kind of with it. Not the leaves on the flower stems, but they've got some foliage, some filler type stuff. Mm-hmm. So separate out that filler material, and that's going to go in your vase first. Okay. One thing to determine is this flower arrangement, is it going to be viewed from all sides, or is it going to be kind of set on a counter so you're only looking at one side? And
or on a table up against a wall.
Against a wall. Oftentimes you see these only from one side. And so you kind of create it from one side, or if you're going to see it from all sides, then do so. But for most of the ones that I do, we're seeing it from just one side primarily. So take the greenery that was in that bunch and put that in the vase. If it's too tall and sticking way up, then just make another cut underwater, cut the stem underwater, and so it's at a proper height. For example, if there's three pieces of greenery, 3 stems of greenery, put those in kind of like at a triangle, all coming out. One in the middle, the other 2 coming out like in a triangle on either side. That creates a framework.
Okay.
Then within your bunch of flowers, they usually have some filler flowers. For example, if it's roses, they'll usually include some little baby's breath, which are those little white flowers.
Yep.
So next, you can add those in to it. The last step is you take your nice big feature flowers. So in the case of roses, maybe you've bought 6 roses. And so you put in those 6 roses. So put some up so they're higher up. They'll have longer stems, so they're kind of higher up. And then locate some of the roses, maybe like 3, that'll be the focal point. Cut the stems shorter so that they're kind of sitting down in, so that when you look at this whole thing, that's where your eye is kind of drawn. That'll be a focal point right down in the kind of the lower center of this whole arrangement.
So the focal point is not the tippy top, the one that's coming out the top. Okay.
Yep. So the focal point isn't on the outer perimeter. The outer perimeter should be a little loose and airy, and the visual weight of this, the focal point, should be at the lower center, kind of right above the top of the container. So it's kind of looking at you. And the outer perimeter, the outer edges, should be a little more loose and airy with more space in between the things. And so those are going to be kind of the star of the whole show, whether it's roses or if you've gotten carnations too. So you group the flowers kind of in the focal point at the center. Those on the outskirts should be a little more loose and not bunched as tightly. And your arrangement should be not one big solid glob, but it should at the outer perimeters have some space in between the things, because it gives kind of a visual weight to it if you've got them at kind of the lower center. And the flowers that are on the outside, you can angle away a little bit. For example, if you picture roses, okay, the focal point roses, that 3 or so roses, the focal point, those should be kind of staring right at you. But the roses that you would put on the outer perimeter, they can be kind of where you're looking at the side of the rose.
Okay.
If that makes, if I can draw that mental picture.
Yeah.
So they're kind of facing not really away from you, but they're not looking you straight in the eye. So they're kind of motioning outward a little bit. And that's one way to think about it too, that the flowers on the outside are kind of steering outward. And then as it kind of comes down towards you, the flowers are looking out at you.
Okay.
And so that just kind of makes it really pleasing. And then, of course, you'll probably need to do a little bit of rearranging. One of the things to make sure that you do is to make sure you cut the stems to the appropriate length. They're usually way too long, especially the flowers that you make the focal point, kind of lower in the arrangement, looking at you. Those will usually the stems be way too long, because the stems on all the flowers are usually the same length.
Mm-hmm.
And so you need to shorten those stems. So a common kind of clumsiness with this is not knowing to cut down some of those flower stems short enough so that they're going to go down in. Otherwise, if you kind of just have them all the same length, you're going to put them in the container and they're just going to be kind of one big mass of some sort.
Yeah, it does kind of depend on the container too, because if you've got a tall, slender container, then maybe you can get away with it a little bit more. But yeah, if you've got, like you said, if you're using like a quart jar, something like that, that's a little bit lower and maybe has a little wider opening, I think I've done this before where I've been happy and brought home a dozen flowers, something like that. And you put them in, and if they're too tall, then they just kind of flop over.
Exactly.
And, so like we're coming up on tulip season. I love tulips. To me, it's a great visual symbol that spring is coming. But if you've just got tulips that are just kind of like limping over the side, that's not very lively.
Exactly. And also in the in floral design, when you get them all kind of positioned in there, if the outer extremities look like they're kind of going to topple over a little bit, bend over, or just look like it's kind of heavy on the outside, well, you can just shorten them down a bit too, so they aren't kind of sending out so far. So another thing, if you kind of want to add a little more finesse, just an easy, simple finesse to add to it would be to take a ribbon and tie that around the container and just kind of make a bow tie, or like you tie your shoe kind of on that container. Or if you don't have a ribbon, there's twine. Twine would work. Almost anything like that you would just kind of tie around the container and put a little bow out front, and that just kind of snazzes it up a little bit too. And then we don't need a big card to go with it, but a simple handwritten note saying something like this: "I saw these and thought of you. Happy Valentine's Day." Wouldn't that just
nice.
That would melt almost any heart?
Yeah.
And it's okay. So if you once you get it all put together and you think, oh boy, I don't know for sure if this looks good. Okay, so here's some kind of emergency fixes. If it all looks too tall, well, then take some of the flowers out, trim them down, cut the stems underwater, and just lower the height of it.
Yep.
That will oftentimes be. If it looks a little sparse, well, then maybe you've made it too big. Maybe you just need to reduce it so that it pulls down together a little bit more. And an important thing too, like with roses, sometimes the outer petals of some of the roses will look a little old or withered. And so Mary taught me this trick is just take off those outer petals. If they've got a little brown on the edge, you can take off some of those outer petals, and then the rose will look nice and fresh again.
Okay.
So if any of them have a little bit about that, don't be afraid to take off some of those. And so it's interesting. After we take a little break, we can kind of take a look at some mistakes to avoid. But, as we're talking about this and we're thinking about, I'm picturing myself or somebody else kind of stumbling through this and then writing the note about, I saw these and thought of you. This could make a Hallmark movie, could be featured on this. The guy wins the girl because he's made this, he's stumbled through making this flower and it just melted her heart, and they go off into the sunset happily ever after. But again, there are some kind of mistakes to avoid. So after a break, let's go through those.
If you're loving this podcast, be sure to check out our full lineup. From news and local politics to sports and true crime, find your next great listen right now at inforum.com/podcasts. That's inforum.com/podcasts.
All right, we're back this week, and this week we're talking about Valentine's Day flowers. If you are in the mind to go out and pick up some flowers, how you can kind of get the most bang for your buck, not necessarily at the store, but just by bringing them home and doing some things yourself. We should also say that too. And nothing against florists, but if there's a big difference between buying a dozen roses as themselves and doing it at home versus buying a dozen roses in a vase from a florist, that adds significantly onto the price. And so, again, we're not trying to put florists out of the business because that's who we're learning from. And they do a great job. So if you want to do that, if you don't have time to arrange flowers yourself, then go to a florist. If you want to do it yourself and add maybe a little personal touch, this is what we're talking about this week.
Definitely. It is. It's the florists do such a wonderful job, and those are so beautiful.
Yeah.
And oftentimes on Valentine's Day, I should mention too, if that's the route that you'd like to follow, order early.
Yep.
Yeah, so that they have the best time to get them prepared, especially for you. But it's interesting. I've been in the flower shop or grocery store by the flower counter the day before Valentine's Day, and there's a line of us a mile long, all getting some cash and carry because we didn't plan far enough ahead. So what I'm mentioning is kind of a little bit of an emergency way of doing things, right, maybe, but also having some good punch with it as long as we're talking about it. Well, let's talk about some mistakes that a person might make when you're putting these together. Okay, it's easier if you select a bunch of flowers that's only one or two types. Some of the bouquets have probably 6 different kinds. Maybe they got a sunflower, maybe they got some daisies, maybe they got some carnations in there, maybe they got a snapdragon. And it's a little harder to put that all together than if you buy a bunch of roses or a couple of colors of carnations, and then they've got some filler flowers and some greenery. So it's a little easier if you don't get the big mixed bouquet. Overcrowding. If you don't space some of the flowers out a little bit, at the outer extremities, like we mentioned, if you don't space some of those out a little, give them a little more room, the whole thing could look overcrowding. Another thing, kind of mentioned this, but lack of height variations. Since they're all going to come about the same length, if you don't cut and vary the height variations, the taller things will go on the outside, the shorter things will make your focal point. So you do need to vary the height in those.
Just kind of like when gardening, we talk about that too. Add some height, some taller elements, some shorter elements that helps bring everything all together.
Exactly. Another mistake to avoid is using a container that would take away from your flower arrangement. So if it's, for Valentine's Day, you maybe wouldn't select your old Halloween container that's in the shape of a pumpkin, but make sure it's something that's appropriate. And the focus on this is the flowers. So the container should maybe be downplayed a little bit in something too. Although, if there's kind of a cool a mug, I shouldn't say flower mug, a coffee type mug,
mm-hmm.
And if it's a smaller bunch of flowers, maybe a coffee type mug would be kind of cute on a smaller scale.
Yeah.
Type flowers, that might work too. And so the main thing is with all of this to just do the best that we can on it. And as you mentioned, John, it's the effort really on this that it's going to be fun. So it would be awesome to hear from you guys as to how it went for you. And of course, these aren't just limited to guys either. Many people don't know kind of how to put a flower arrangement together. So although we're kind of targeting novice
arrangers,
exactly,
new flower.
So even though we're kind of doing this, kind of tailoring this towards guys arranging some flowers to give for Valentine's Day. These are techniques that can be used for anytime you bring home cash and carry flowers, or even cut them out of your own flower garden to use and enjoy indoors.
If you wanted to go the route of, because you can go to a store and you can pick up a couple of different bouquets. Do you have suggestions on what pairs well, what you think pairs well as far as the look together, either colors or types of flowers?
And sometimes when cost is a factor, roses are probably the most expensive because the big wholesalers that produce these roses, supply and demand, they know around Valentine's Day they can command a greater price. So roses are always a higher price than other things. So maybe you buy a smaller bunch of roses, and add carnations. Roses and carnations. I can see some pretty red roses with maybe some white carnations added in. And so those always go well together. Or just a solid bouquet of carnations with some little filler type flowers that came in the bunch. Those are going to go well too. So again, making sure the colors don't clash, adding yellows in with reds probably, aren't going to convey that Valentine, aura that maybe we want to convey.
Over the holidays, Sam made a couple of really nice bouquets. And one of the things that we did is that, we used maybe an old piece of pottery instead of a vase.
Oh, good idea.
That was, like you said, not too flashy. It's not going to be taken away. But because it was wider on the bottom and it had a wider top, what she did is she used got some chicken wire, cut up some chicken wire, kind of molded that a little bit in the bottom, and that helped maybe kind of with some upright structure, helped kind of hold things up a little bit. And of course that can sit in water. That's fine. So I thought that was a pretty good idea. Another thing she did is we had kind of a rectangular shaped vase, and she put what's the clear tape, like a little Scotch tape. Scotch tape, she made it into about 6 squares by doing that, by creating that. And that also helped. That was a glass vase, so you would have to see through it. So she used the Scotch tape, so it's kind of invisible. But then that helped also add some support for.
Well, you've hit on one of the challenges, and that is when you're putting these flowers in, like we described. How do you get them to stay where you want them to stay?
Right.
Okay, so you kind of want them, I said, like the lower ones, you want them to face outward. Well, how do you get them to stay where you want them to stay? Well, sometimes you can kind of finagle them, and if there's enough stems in the vase or container, they'll kind of stay put. But crumpling up chicken wire, and then that gives spaces where you insert the stem, and that will hold them where you want. So that's a great idea. And the Scotch tape across in kind of a grid, and then the spaces in between can hold. And if you really want to up your game, the hobby stores and some of the floral places will sell it. It's blocks of floral foam. They look like styrofoam, but they're not styrofoam, because styrofoam won't absorb water, but these blocks of florist foam will. And hobby stores will sell this. The common brand name of it is Oasis.
Okay.
Oasis floral foam. And so many of the florists will sell you a block you don't need the whole block for your arrangement. It's kind of sold in a brick, and maybe sort of for a normal arrangement, maybe a third of the brick or so, or a half of that. And you soak that in water, put it in your container, and then you put the stems of the flowers down into that, and it holds it exactly where. So that's one of the keys. If you buy a florist arrangement, you'll usually see when you examine down in the mechanism of it, you'll see that it usually has that florist foam holding the flowers in place, unless it's just a bunch of roses sold in a water-filled vase. But most arrangements that have a design will have that florist foam in it. Before that was created, and still very usable, were like the chicken wire frames and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. That, again, if you were using a tall, slender vase, you probably wouldn't need that support in there because it's confined by itself. But something that's maybe a bigger opening on top.
For example, if you had like kind of a bowl or a wider and shorter type container, and then that oasis can be put down in that, and your arrangement, the flower stems put into that, and it holds them exactly in the position you want.
I think I've seen like either glass beads or glass marbles also used in the bottom. That's it's kind of another way to kind of, you really would have to put a little bit more in there maybe, but if you had if you didn't need as much, then maybe you can.
And occasionally you will see, you'll still see a frog, and a frog is a florist. Before the invention of the florist foam, you had to use these other things. A frog, a florist's frog, is a round, what are they, maybe like 4 inches in diameter, a flat, round thing, and it had a bunch of spikes coming out of it. In that 4-inch round, 3 to 4 inch round, probably had 50 spikes all coming up out.
Very, very small, like
and you would
almost
push the stems down into those, and it would hold them where you want. So occasionally you'll still see a frog. I'm not sure how it got that name. I suppose because it sat down in the water. Yeah, like a frog.
All very interesting today and all very useful. So hopefully, I know I'm going to try out some of these techniques. Hopefully some of the listeners do. And if they do,
send me pictures.
Yes, let's do that.
We'd love to see pictures of these.
That would be fun. Well, Don, thanks again. And if people have questions for you about floral arrangements, or
if you've grown purple tree collards,
I was going to say,
and gotten it to overwinter,
or anything along the lines, what's the best way to reach you?
Send me an email, donald.kinsler, KINZLER, @ndsu.edu.
All right. Well, thanks again for coming by this week.
Thank you, John. Thanks, everyone, for listening.